believe it was December, after I had been elected the first time in November, I received a call from the Consul General's of Japan office in San Francisco saying they were going to pay a visit to the mayor's office in Longmont. Can you imagine that? They came and they said that for the first time in the history of the monarchy, the Emperor and Empress wanted to visit and stay in an ordinary home in the United States.
Wow.
Well, the Economic Council had asked Bill Hosokawa, who was a journalist for the Denver Post at the time, and he was the honorary Consul General of Japan, lived in Denver. And because he had the Longmont connections, they asked him where in the United States could the Emperor and Empress stay.
Right.
And of course, they suggested the most wonderful community in the country,
Yeah.
Longmont.
Wow.
So I had to keep it quiet, except for the city council members, staff, of course, because they brought the entourage of the Secret Service, all of this. This was January. They came that year, June 18th, and we had quite a ceremony.
Oh, yeah.
They stayed at Ken Pratt's home, Ken and Susan
Right.
Pratt,
Nice.
in my neighborhood, not far from where your grandparents live. We didn't tell the citizens until they were almost ready to arrive.
Yeah.
We had little Japanese and American flags all over the community. They came to the Pratt home and they stayed there. My husband, who is not, he's a very ordinary person, isn't impressed by royalty or anywhere else, but they gave us a lot of information. And one of the things is the Empress made her children's lunch. They always have boxes in Japan that they take for their lunch. She nursed the children when they were little, and my husband said, well, she seems like an ordinary person. Well, when we spent time with them, they were just wonderful.
Nice.
And we had the sister city connection then also. And when they were leaving, they asked us to come bid them farewell. And of course, we lived in the neighborhood.
Right.
And they, as the Emperor and Empress were walking down the stairs, she reached over and brushed the side of his jacket. And my husband said, just like every other woman, doing this.
Right.
And so they were quite, I say, ordinary. When my neighbor, Ken Pratt, had cancer, I was leaving for Japan. And while I was in Japan, the Emperor and Empress reached me in a totally different area of Japan to tell me that Ken had died.
Wow.
That happened even before the city contacted me.
Wow.
And so I was in Japan when Ken Pratt was buried and all of this. But the interesting thing about that is the city council renamed the street, which is now Ken Pratt Boulevard. And he knew we were trying to do it. It was controversial.
Right, yeah.
And he would say to his wife, when is Leona going to get that finished? And so I had the city make up the big sign, Ken Pratt Boulevard, took it to their house. His wife put it at the foot of his bed, and it said Ken Pratt Boulevard.
Yeah.
So he died before we were able to dedicate Ken Pratt Boulevard. But that's sort of the backstory
That's
of
amazing.
Ken Pratt Boulevard.
Yeah.
So it was a fun time and an
Wow.
interesting time. And
Yeah.
so
That's cool that they just reached you. And did they have any idea you were there?
no,
No. Wow.
no. But we had a wonderful time with the Emperor and Empress because he was interested in biology and horticulture.
Oh, yeah.
And so they went up to Rocky Mountain National Park,
that was good.
and we had, to this day, I still have people who call me and they say, I was at this Asian restaurant in Boulder and I saw your picture. But we were taken to the Flagstaff House, which is the finest restaurant in the world. Wish I could afford to eat there often.
Right.
And it was the Emperor and Empress and their entourage. Susan Pratt sat on one side of him, I sat on the other. And then I always laughed because Jimmy Kanemoto was, of course, fabulous man. He and I sat with them. His wife and my husband Bernie were relegated to the next step down. But they were wonderful, very, very ordinary royal people.